Hey, what's going on? Welcome to the Podcast Accelerator, the thrice-weekly show that brings you podcast education, industry insights, and straight talking reactions to podcasting news. I'm your host, Mark Asquith, that British podcast guy and CEO and co-founder here at Rebel Base Media, the podcasting tech company that creates the Podcast Success Academy, podcast websites, Productivity, Rebel Base Studios, and Captivate.fm, the world's only growth-oriented podcast host where you can get your first month of podcast hosting for just $1 and transfer an existing podcasting completely for free. So please go ahead and check it out now at Captivate.fm. So today we're going to talk about, maybe something that I've made up. I don't know, I feel like I've maybe made this term up. But we're going to talk about understanding the listener acquisition flow. Does that sound like something I've made up? You know me by now. I like to make things up like that, but it makes sense, all right? When I talk to you about this concept, it's a strategic marketing concept that I want you to start to think about. But before I do that, just a couple of things. Number one, AWeber, the amazing team at AWeber. Well, what more can I keep saying about AWeber? They are the best in the email marketing business, and we do so much with them here at Rebel Base Media and under markasquith.com. They've helped us to grow our business just since day one. Honestly, I can't speak highly enough of Brandon and Chris and Tom and the team over at AWeber, who are the leaders in the field when it comes to email marketing. In fact, they were the first email marketing company to pioneer email automation, something that we rely upon so very, very much. And, look, you need to be email marketing. You need to be talking to your listeners. You've got to be engaging with your audience. And if you're not doing that, then I urge you to please go and check out AWeber completely for free for 90 days at markasquith.com/AWeber. The second thing I want to say is I'm really sorry. I've got a bit of a frog in my throat today. I'm going to try my best not to kind of cough and splutter all the way through this. But hey, you know me. I'm kind of footloose and fancy free when it comes to podcasting. So, I might cough and splutter a little bit more. I'm sorry. I apologize. Sure, I could edit it out, but, you'll lose the kind of live charm that I've got on these podcasts. That's me saying that it's charming, by the way. I realize that you might completely disagree. But I have got a frog in my throat. The third thing that I want to announce is a big congratulations to Izzy, one of our very own Rebel Base Media team members, on the launch of her podcast, All Things Dark and Horrorful. Please go and check it out by heading up to your podcast app of choice and checking out the trailer for All Things Dark and Horrorful. It's a wonderful show, and I urge you to check it out if you're a fan of storytelling and if you're a fan of horror. Okay, so the podcast landscape has changed, and with it, more and more podcasts are appearing every single day. No longer can we expect potential listeners to just dive into our show. Rather, we've got to consider how we nurture them with our audio. Here's my take on the listener acquisition flow. Now, I'm not sure if this is a concept that's been out there before. I've certainly never seen it before. I've certainly never heard the phrase listener acquisition flow before. I apologize if it is a thing that's out there to the person that invented it. But I've been thinking about this for a while now. If you consider what we already do, and I've spoken about this, if you go to rebelbasemedia.io/discoverability, I've spoken about this at some length because, what we do is we share our podcasts and we chuck them out on social media, and we'll maybe put like shareable quotes out there, and we do all that kind of fancy stuff. But what we'll tend to do is we'll say, right, okay, here's you looking at a tweet. Here's me putting something on that tweet that theoretically is enticing you in. Oh, and there's a link to my 45-minute podcast. I ain't going to do that. I ain't going to risk that I'm not going to like this podcast for 45 minutes, all right? I'm not going to risk doing that. On the other side of that, what we tend to do is we always measure downloads, and theoretically what we want to do as podcasters is not only do we want to increase our downloads, but we want to increase the number of regular downloads that we get, aka we want to upgrade and we want to increase the number of actual subscribers that we have. That is to say, people who listen regularly on a basis that we can rely upon to our podcast. Because there are so many podcasts in the world, because people who are on Twitter normally have really busy timelines, and on Instagram they've got really busy timelines and everything else, you consider there's just that much noise out there. How can we possibly expect people to consider listening to a 45-minute episode of our show? So I've come up with what I think are the 5 stages of podcast listening. The 5 stages of podcast listening. This is the listener acquisition flow. And what we've got to do inside our marketing is we've got to move people through this flow. And it's just like a sales process. It's just like a sales funnel. Here are those 5 stages. Number 1, your listener, your potential listener, your prospect. Stage number 1 that they can find themselves in is they are a lurker. A lurker. Maybe they've been recommended to your podcast. Maybe they've kind of heard of you. Maybe they kind of follow you on Twitter or maybe the gram. Maybe they're scrolling around and thinking, yeah, all right, I get that. That person's got a show, but I'm not really that interested. Maybe they see some advertising. And throughout all of the 7 to 10 touch points it takes to convert someone to action, maybe they're thinking to themselves, yeah, all right, my awareness is up of this person. I get it. They exist. Maybe they've got a podcast. I understand that. Okay, that's the lurker stage. Our job then is to get people moving from being a lurker to stage 2, which is to move them to being a curious explorer, a term that I've made up, completely made up, a curious explorer. Now, this is where we entice that person to take a little bit of action. And just like in sales, it's a tripwire action. It's a low-level investment in return for something that they understand and that gives completely disproportionately high value in return for that minimum time investment. That is, we get our curious explorers to try our podcast trailer. 90 seconds. Giving people the insight. What can I expect from this show? When does it come out? Who's the host? What are they talking about? Why do they do this? Where can I get it? Is it free? Dead simple stuff. So it's not that intro that you put on your podcast, which is all the kind of sponsor stuff and that kind of sales stuff and whoa, what's going on? This is what I'm talking about today. It's none of that stuff. It's 1.5 minutes of pure, succinct, here is what you can expect from my podcast. And thus, the Curious Explorer has entered the audio ecosystem. At which point, we give them a call to action during our trailer. Go and try this episode, a curated best of episode, or a episode 1. And we convert these people to a listener. Stage 3 of the listener acquisition flow. Stage 3 is for them to listen. Now, you might be thinking, well, Marco, that's it. It's finished. The listener acquisition flow is done. Call it quits at 7 minutes, 41 seconds on your podcast, Mark. Wrong. Because listeners are sporadic. They might dive in, they might dive out. So the next thing that we have to do is we've got to construct our episodes and construct our marketing in such a way that it entices people to become the next level. And that next level of the listener acquisition flow is, you probably guessed it, is for that listener to become a subscriber, a regular player on your podcast, a regular person in your ecosystem who listens more often than they don't. They listen to 8, 9 out of 10 shows. They listen to most things that you put out. You're not going to catch people that listen to everything. I get that. But you want them to listen to the majority, all right? You want to push them through to stage number 4 of the listener acquisition flow, which is a subscriber. Last up, this is the ultimate. This is where we want to get them to. We take them from being not only a subscriber, but to stage 5 of the listener acquisition flow. We take them to become. We move them through. We build a fan, and we turn them into a sharer. Someone who is going to share and advocate what you do, that is going to love everything that you do and put it out there with such gusto that you can't believe all the notifications on Twitter, all the replies to your email and your Instagram posts. They have become a sharer. They are telling the world. And that is the listener acquisition flow. And our marketing has to uphold that. It has to pull people through that process. We've got to get people through from one step to the next. We've got to build in actions and tactics into our marketing that makes it easy for people to take the step from lurker to curious explorer to listener to subscriber and then to sharer. It has to be easy and it's got to be well planned. Now, I'm going to be talking about this I reckon in a little bit more depth, because I find it very, very interesting. Now, if you go and look at my site, markasquith.com, that is all geared up at getting curious, lurking people through to the curious explorer stage and then to the listener stage. My website, markasquith.com, focuses in the podcasting section just on those 3 areas, getting people into the trailer and then into listening to something else. From there, if you listen, my episodes here, they're intended to take you through from being a listener to a subscriber, all right? That's how I work that flow. So please go and check it out, markasquith.com, and see what you can do with the listener acquisition flow. I find it interesting, and I'm sure you can get some short-term, quick wins from implementing this kind of strategy. And thank you so much for joining me on the Podcast Accelerator, as always. And remember to tell your podcasting friends that the show is available to listen to for free in any app that supports podcasts. Hint, hint, that's me turning you from a subscriber to a sharer. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink. And if you're wondering what the best next step to take for your own show is, whether you're a new or a vet podcaster, please go ahead and take our short 5-minute survey where I'm going to help you to diagnose and solve the biggest issue holding back your show and, of course, your podcast growth. So, not only am I going to give you the answer to that question, but I'm going to give you access to our free, vibrant Podcast Rebellion community, our weekly free group coaching from me and the team, and I'm going to give you actionable and insider-only emails, plus even a free invitation to the Podcast Success Academy. So please go ahead and invest 5 minutes now to grow your podcast by heading to rebelbasemedia.io/grow. And until the next time, never forget, the more you expect from yourself, the more you will excel.